Hi folks, welcome back. So we're here doing some more adaptive yoga on the Adaptive Fitness channel. And I'd like to highlight an area of the body which is really important for both stability, balance, and posture. And that's something that grows increasingly important for us as we age because it can become very problematic. So I'd like to bring attention to the hips and the pelvis, and specifically looking at that combination of mobility and stability that's necessary for proper alignment at this area, which then leads to good balance, walking stride, and good posture. And we all know how important all of those things are. So I might turn your attention to the previous video that we published, moving with the breath, because that is another component here of anything we're doing. If you can really get in touch with your breath and whenever possible move in conjunction with your breath, like I highlight in that previous video. When you're ready, let's get settled in a chair, and ideally one that gives you some room, all right, so you can move off to the side a little bit. You'll see we're gonna get the legs moving around in some specific areas. I really like these style of metal folded chairs, but really anything can do that's nice and stable, and it doesn't have the arms on the side, so you can move out from there. And then get a seat and comfortably sit upright. And just get in touch with your breath. Let's just take a few moments to breathe as you've settled now more into a good position where we can start to bring attention not only to your hip and pelvis, but also your spine, because obviously they are very much connected. And the position of your pelvis and your hips very much dictates what positioning and alignment your spine is able to take from there. So we'll put some attention into that here very soon. But for now, a little bit of warming up as we bring more attention to the body in these areas. Let's start with just a little bit of a marching movement, picking up one foot and then the other. Now I have my hands resting on my hips here, which is fine. Some of you may want to place your hands on the sides of the chair to help you feel extra stable. Or if you have one leg that doesn't want to lift quite as high as the other one, then bring in some support with one or both hands and give that one leg a little more support. So you've got a more symmetrical marching stride here. Take some deep, full breaths. And again, and then we will plant the feet back on down below the knees. You might even move the ankles and the feet, toes around a little bit, just like what we do a lot of in my feet yoga video, which I again encourage you to take time with. But our focus isn't so much on the feet for this video. We're gonna now bring awareness more up into these areas. So do try to place your hands around the crest of your pelvis, the hip bones up here, and start to do a little rocking from side to side, shifting your body weight, not too far, at least at first. Not that at some point, as you get more comfortable doing this exercise, we're not playing with our tipping point, which is another great exercise. But for now, feeling the body weight shifting from one hip to the other. And then take a pause, balance out the hips, the pelvis. Another aspect of the pelvis that we frequently bring attention to in yoga are the sits bones, those two bony bones that protrude straight down from the pelvis. And they're good awareness points because if your pelvis is pulled back quite a bit, you'll be on the back parts of your sits bones, and you might even feel some weight down into the tailbone, the coccyx. That's good awareness to have if you're feeling that sensation. On the other end, if your pelvis is anteriorly tilted quite forward, then you'll be more on the front parts of the sits bones. That's good awareness too. To know when you are right on the center of your sits bones is very good awareness. And I hope as we do these exercises more often, you will have that awareness. But for now, I'd like to go back to your side to side rocking or tilting. We're gonna add in in another component to this though. Some of these side abdominal muscles called the obliques. We're gonna do a little side crunching. As you lift one hip off the chair, crunch in so that the low rib and your side hip bone are coming towards each other, then plant it back down and crunch to the other side. Again, you may want to have hands on the sides of the chair to help you feel good and safe and stable as you crunch side to side. So we're bringing in more awareness, more blood flow and warmth into these whole area, and we are now ready to fine tune where your hips are on the seat of your chair. And for the next exercise, I'd like your hips to be as far forward on the seat of the chair as possible. So here's what I'll suggest. Do those side to side crunch movements when you lift one hip and then the other, and then little walking, like a shifting of the hips forward so that you eventually make your way more to the front part of your chair seat and replant, rebalance, and you may want to replant the feet as well. Bring those out there and underneath the knees. Now, really lengthen back up to the spine. Don't be afraid to use your arms and even your hands here to give you a little bit of a boost to get nice and lengthened up. Take a good few full breaths. Could be deep belly breaths, like I talk about in my Moving with Breath or conscious breathing videos. Could be more of the complete breath, traveling through the full distance of the lungs from the bottom all the way to the top. Either way, full rhythmic and complete breaths for you. Now, let's pick up your right leg. Give it some support with a hand, and we're just gonna open that knee and whole thigh out to the side and in. Out and in. I'm gonna do at least 8 or 10 times. You could do more. It's a good idea to change the angle. Maybe some of the time you're doing it down low and then a few times bringing it up higher. Maybe a few times to see how high up you can go here. And then we'll bring it forward. Perhaps, if comfortable, hug the whole knee up in towards the chest, then plant the foot back down. Take a few conscious breaths here. Now we're ready to go to the other side. Pick up your left leg, give it some support, and move out and in. Starting a little low, and maybe getting a bit higher. And when you feel like you've done about the same number that you did on the first side, we'll bring the leg forward and perhaps hug it up and in. Lower back on down, plant, and get nice and long, and a feeling of balance in between. Now we've really brought some good blood flow, warmth, and mobility through the hip joints themselves. This body awareness is really important as we progress. Having adequate hip mobility is very important when we start to fine-tune how our pelvis is positioned. And that's the highlight here. Positioning your pelvis in just the right way that helps to elongate your spine and hence that great posture, both when you're seated and when you're standing. Now, I should say, when we're talking about the pelvis position, what is neutral pelvis for you is going to be different than everybody else. We are very unique in these areas. The way our hip joint structure is placed here, it's very different. And so you're going to be finding your own best alignment in these ways. Also, when your pelvis is in position when you're sitting is different when you're standing, and fine-tuning that pelvic position in each of those places, even when you're lying down, is going to be another important part of this focus. But for now, we're just going to stay seated and start to move the hips and the pelvis in a forward and backward rocking motion. Posterior tilting, we're rounding it back. You're gonna feel a little bit of pressure down on the tailbone there. Anterior tilting will tilt forward, and that tailbone will actually kind of be lifting up away from you, behind you there a bit. And you'll notice what happens with this portion of the body as I very obviously am tilting in these areas. Now, many of my clients have lost a lot of their awareness and mobility in this area, and that's one of the reasons why I'm highlighting it. So my movement, I'm exaggerating for you here today so that you can get the essence of any degree of movement through this range of motion as you possibly can, knowing that as long as this is pain-free, you're not aggravating any injury issues, you're working within your pain-free range of motion, any degree of movement here, posterior and anterior tilt, is going to benefit you when it comes to alignment, balance, stability while you're walking, and our great posture. So as you feel, you can move through as freely as possible, anterior and posterior tilting, then placing your hands on the hip crests here, lengthen up the spine, bring your pelvis into as much of a neutral position as possible. That means you're not tilting too much forward and not pulled too much back. That's a struggle for a lot of my students, I know. So we might be working the mobility of the hip joints and some stability, strengthening through this area as well to help to bring the body into this position. Seated is just one of the ways that we'll work with this. But for now, I'd like you to feel a sense that your pelvis is coming into neutral and we're lengthening up through the spine, and maybe let your shoulders roll a few times, forward, up, back, and down. Take a few good full breaths here. So now we're activating some of the more of the back muscles, especially the upper back here. This is going to help you with that upright posture focus. And again. And then eventually let the shoulders relax more in the back down position, but you'll feel a little bit of tone still in the upper back, down through the back, and stabilizing the hips and the pelvis here. Take a good few breaths. And then we're going to do a little stretch out for these areas. We'll lift one leg up at a time, give it a good hug in, another full breath, and lower back down. Place the foot. Now the other side, hug it in, and lower back on down. Placing the feet, sitting nice and upright. Now we get to enjoy some of the flexibility and mobility that we've gained in this series of exercises. We're going to do a little bit of a long held stretch that'll really nicely open the hip flexors, might get some inner thigh work for some of you too. So let's pick up the right leg and give that little in and out movement a few more times, prepping that hip joint for a little more of a stretch. And then really pay attention to how you're feeling the knee joint, the hip joint especially, as we go into this. Flexing the foot can help, lifting up just a little bit. You might kind of reach down with your left hand to give your right foot some support and allow the right knee to open out to the side. Now, some people are really tight in this area, or if there's any pain issues in the joint, then you may not want to go any higher than this. Just keep inviting the knee to open out. But if it's comfortable for you, draw that leg up, connecting your outer right foot onto your left thigh somewhere. See how that feels for you. Inviting the knee to open out and down is one way of going about this stretch. Some people prefer or need to do a little more of an angle, bringing the knee a little more up and in. So you might play around with both of these options or anywhere in between and see what seems to work best, not only for the stretch sensation that we're going for here, but for knee and hip comfort, the joint itself. So finding one of these two, and then we're going to go towards a bit of a forward fold. So a nice easygoing stretch. Start with a few deep breaths. And then ease your way forward just to that point where you experience a stretch sensation, and you probably won't have to go very far. Now, I'm not going to hold it very long today, this particular time, but I urge you to come back to this style of stretch on both sides in your daily life, and perhaps hold this stretch a bit longer. But for now, just a few more breaths. Finding ease and comfort as best you can. And then we'll come on up, nice and long. You can lift up, support that leg, give it a little more of a hug in if you like. Then we'll place the right foot on down. We're going to switch sides. Don't be surprised if one hip is tighter than the other. As you explore this with your yoga mentality, many people discover that one side is tighter than the other, and there's usually a very good reason why. So when I'm going into my opposite side here, after I do a few warm-up movements of the whole leg, preparing that hip, I'm going to give you an option of supporting the leg in a different way. So if by chance bringing the knee out to the side and connecting your outer foot onto the thigh is not comfortable, is not doable, if you're holding on for dear life, that kind of thing, do not force it. Not worth it at all. What you'll want to do is bring in a second prop. That could be a chair, a second chair that I'm going to bring over a little bit more in front of me here. And this positioning, this angle might be much better for some people, maybe just on one side, to give yourself the support you need to make this a comfortable stretch. Another option is a fit ball, those wonderful big fit balls. We use those quite a bit in our classes. That can be another nice implement to place your foot on, and then you can change the angle from the knee, the hip very easily with that fit ball. So whatever you're choosing, open the knee out wide, or again, maybe it's more of this type of an angle that's better for you, joint-wise or stretch-wise. But after you've explored and discovered what you think is going to be the best for you today, let's enter into a forward fold. Start with a few breaths and ease your way into it. Nice and easy, just to that beginning of a stretch sensation. Support your body accordingly. That's another reason why I love additional props. You can use those as you come into your forward fold and breathe. Now, as I said before, it's very common that people discover that they have a tighter hip on one side or the other. And most often that is because you've gotten into the habit of sitting cross-legged, either in this style of cross-legged position, or many of us have gotten in the habit of sitting cross-legged like this. And most of us have gotten in the habit at some point of crossing one leg dominantly over the other, maybe almost never crossing the other one over top. That causes a shifting of stability and flexibility in the hips over time. So if you're always crossing in this style, that means this top leg hip area is going to be chronically lengthened, possibly even weakened in that lengthening up into the low back, and this bottom leg hip side has now become chronically shortened and tighter, and that's what causes that imbalance, which can cause problems with back issues, stride issues, all those things. So it's very good to become aware of what's going on in the body in these areas and how you are choosing to hold yourself, your body alignment, and then work at balancing that out. And doing just what we did here today is a great way of doing that. So that's all for today. Keep practicing. Give me some feedback. Let me know how you like this, how it's working for you, and come back again soon. Namaste.